Sexual violence targeting black women. Black women seeking to assert the rights of citizenship and freedom after emancipation faced dangers based on their race and sex just as they had for generations while enslaved. Black women were killed in the same lynchings and massacres that took the lives of black men, but they were also more likely to suffer the trauma of sexual violence. In May 1870, 15 white men raped a black woman while other members of the mob lynched her husband. Days later in the same North Carolina community, another white mob raped a black woman and afterwards stuck their knives in various parts of her body. News of incidents like these spread through the entire African American community, devastating black women with the terror of their dual vulnerability. Enslaved black women had no legal means to resist or protect themselves from sexual assault by white slave owners. As early as the 1830s, black abolitionist Maria Stuart called for the law to recognize black women as full humans with rights to control their bodies and to grant or withhold consent, but reality lagged far behind. Point 2 In Missouri in 1855, a young enslaved black woman named Celia was convicted of murder and hanged for killing a white man who had enslaved and repeatedly raped her. The court rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that enslaved black women had no right to resist white slave owners' sexual advances. Point 3. White Southerners were determined to maintain the economic exploitation and political dominance they had enjoyed during slavery, and white men refused to relinquish their freedom to violate black women with impunity. Even before the Civil War's end, Southern state legislatures implemented laws providing different sexual protections to white women and black women. The Georgia Code of 1861 specified a mandatory sentencing range for raping a white woman but let courts decide whether and how to punish rapes of black women. Point 4. Indifferent and complicit law enforcement officers undermined federal attempts to protect black women. In October 1866, a Freedmen's Bureau agent delivered arrest warrants for 2 white men accused of beating a black woman named Sylvie Soilian and killing her son, but the local Louisiana sheriff refused to arrest them. Point 5 That summer in Louisiana, Bureau records reveal an even more devastating story. Captain N.B. Blanton, Sparta, reports Cuff Canara, Freedman, and Dan Docking, White, had a quarrel because Docking had twice committed a rape on the freedman's wife. Canara started to agent of Bureau, was tracked by hounds for 10 miles and fired on by Dan Docking, Norman Docking, and John Palmer. Shot in left side of back, illegible, finally reached agent, having killed 3 out of 4 of the dogs. Warrants issued for arrest of parties but they have not been found, and from statement of people does not think they will be arrested, the people appearing to think the freedman had committed the greater crime by killing the dogs, than the man who shot him. Point 6. Scholar Estelle Friedman writes that white people deepened the association of rape as an act committed by a black man against a white woman during Reconstruction and presumed that black women either welcomed forced sexual relations with white men or had no moral purity to defend. 7 The same white men who professed a fanatical concern for white women's purity and safety held tightly to the social and legal view of black women as promiscuous, lacking virtue, and without the right to refuse the lust of any white man. This particular narrative of racial difference shielded white men from shame and consequence when they employed sexual assault as yet another means of terrorizing black communities during Reconstruction. In 1868, after a white Virginia judge was accused of assaulting a black woman, he tried the case himself, jailed the woman overnight, and forced her husband to pay court fees. 8 In June 1866, also in Virginia, a black woman named Peggy Rich reported that a white man named James Smith had assaulted her. He attacked Ms. Rich again after he was released on bail and was later acquitted of both charges. 9. In September 1866, a black woman named Rhoda Ann Childs reported to the Freedmen's Bureau that 8 white planters had come to her Georgia home demanding to see her husband. When they learned Mrs. Childs was alone, the men kidnapped, beat, and sexually assaulted her. Mrs. Childs's affidavit describes that one of the men ran his pistol into me, and said he had a hell of a mind to pull the trigger, and several of the men restrained her while one applied the strap to my private parts until fatigued into stopping, and I was more dead than alive. After another of the men, a former Confederate soldier, raped Mrs. Childs, the mob robbed her home and beat her daughters. 10. In 1871, Harriet Simrel testified before a joint congressional committee that 3 white men had raped her in Columbia, South Carolina, after her husband refused to vote for the white supremacist ticket. In a courageous statement to federal lawmakers, Ms. Simrel named her attackers and described their brutality, spitting in my face and throwing dirt in my eyes, and after that they dragged me out into the big road, and they ravished me out there. 11 The details of the attack were deemed too obscene for inclusion in the committee's published volumes, but the defiant courage Ms. Simrel and so many other black women exhibited in reporting such attacks stands as enduring evidence of the sexualized terror black women suffered during Reconstruction and their determination to survive.